Congratulations, true crime addicts. We've survived another week. It is Friday, July 12th, 2024. This week, the jurors in the Karen Read case wanted to acquit. Missouri police arrest a serial killer in training. And Alice Munro is the worst. All this and more. Stay tuned.
Yes, super excited. We are all pumped to have James Renner.
James Renner on.
That James Renner has zeroed in on.
James Renner once again drops a bombshell.
Investigative journalist, reporter, James Renner, who's been on the podcast, longtime friend of mine.
And welcome back to True Crime This Week with me, your host, James Renner. There's the James Renner bell. Hey, at the top of the show, I want to tell you a little good news here. For the first time, my Novela Muse is available in paperback. Yes, a couple years ago, I wrote a horror story, fiction. It's a little break from true crime. I like to dab in fiction too, in the literati. And Muse is about a private investigator hired by a young writer to steal something from the estate of H.P. Lovecraft. And mayhem ensues. It's a fun little detective mystery. It's set in the 60s. If you like that sort of stuff, give it a read. It's really cheap. I think it's like $15 right now. It's at Cemetery Dance. Go to jamesrenner.com for the link. But check it out. Muse. That's my new novella. So, hey, as always, at the top of the show, I want to thank my buddy Walter for manning the camera. Walter's just back from the Alice Munro book burning in Times Square. So thanks for being here tonight, Walter. Let's get to the top stories. That's what you came here for. You want some true crime news. You might have thought we had enough of the Karen Read story last week after the mistrial, but the fallout continued this week with lots and lots of new developments. First, 4 jurors have come forward stating that their team had voted unanimously to acquit Read on the charges of second-degree murder and leaving the scene of personal injury and death. That's 2 of the 3 charges against her. The reason jurors wanted to find Read not guilty of the second-degree murder charge and fleeing the scene is because nobody thought she could have murdered her boyfriend on purpose. And those 2 charges deal with intent. However, Judge Auntie Bev dismissed the jury without inquiring where they stood on each count after declaring the mistrial. It's typical for the judges to go back to the jury and see how they came out on each count, but she just, declared a mistrial, dismissed them, gone, and that was it. The big question now is, did she know where they stood, and did she hope that they'd stay quiet after the verdict? Because now we have a big problem, because it looks like if they try to charge Karen Read with those counts again, it could be double jeopardy. So a hearing has been set to determine if charging her again does in fact account for double jeopardy. Spoiler alert, yes it would. Also this week, Trooper Michael Proctor was formally suspended without pay following a duty hearing, according to CBS News. During the trial, Read's defense team had Proctor read several inappropriate messages he sent to friends while he was investigating John O'Keefe's death. In these texts, he talked about looking for nude photos on her phone. He calls her a whack job and says, quote, hopefully she kills herself, end quote. Canton police officer Kevin Albert was also placed on leave last month, but that was only confirmed by officials this week. Kevin is the brother of Brian Albert, who owned that property where O'Keefe's body was found. He's also a friend of Trooper Proctor. It's a very small little tight-knit group there. The 2 of them, this is Proctor and Kevin Albert, they went out drinking in July 2022, and Kevin got so hammered he left his badge in Proctor's car and couldn't find his gun for a while. He texted Proctor the next day and said he felt hungover and that he'd need a couple more drinks to feel good again. It's Massachusetts' finest right there. If you live in eastern Massachusetts, I don't know what to tell you. Just drive safely. Prosecutors in Missouri charged 41-year-old Timothy Haslet with murder this week, and it appears Haslet may very well be a serial killer, or was at least attempting to become one, according to NBC News. This story actually begins in October 2022 when a woman escaped from the basement of his house and ran to neighbors for help. The woman was wearing a trash bag, latex lingerie, and a metal dog collar with a padlock around her neck. When police arrived, she told them that Haslet had picked her up in Kansas City in September and offered her $350 to go back to his house. On the way there, Haslet pulled a gun on her and confiscated her cell phone before making her take a drug that made her go to sleep. For the next few weeks, he kept her in his dungeon-like basement, chaining her wrists and ankles so she could not leave. There were also cameras and torture equipment inside the basement. I'm not going to go into the details of what he did to her, but he warned her at one time if she did not comply, she would end up like the two other women who'd come before her. He threatened to put her in a barrel like the rest of them. Then after his arrest, authorities discovered a barrel in a nearby river, and inside was the body of Janie Crossdale. That was the murder for which Haslet was finally charged this week. Police believe she was killed sometime between June 6, 2022 and October 7th of that year. Detectives have discovered photos of Crossdale on a device owned by Haslet, which shows her inside his basement. That is the stuff of nightmares. The body and identity of the alleged second victim have not yet been discovered. By the way, the woman who escaped was able to do so by slipping out of her restraints when Haslet left to drop his son off for school. The world of literature is not often featured on True Crime This Week, but the literati are in a state this week after it was revealed that Nobel Prize-winning author Alice Munro knew that her husband had raped her daughter on several occasions and did nothing about it, and decided to stay married to him and keep it a secret. According to National Review, Andrea Skinner, Alice Munro's daughter, revealed this week that her mother knew for years that her stepfather, Gerald Fremlin, had sexually abused her, beginning when she was just 9 years old. Munro learned of the abuse in 1992 and chose to do fuck all. Munro told her daughter then that she'd been told too late, and she loved him too much to leave him, and said whatever happened between you and your stepfather. Over the years, it seems the abuse became kind of an open secret in the world of publishing, where Munro's books continued to sell and sell and sell and make many people a lot of money. According to Skinner, she told Munro's biographer, Robert Thacker, about the abuse before his book came out, and he too chose to do nothing. In 2005, Fremlin, then 80 years old, admitted to the abuse and pled guilty to indecent assault, receiving a suspended sentence and 2 years probation. So the abuse itself has been known publicly since 2005. What wasn't known until this week was that Alice herself knew for years and chose her husband over her daughter. Now critics are debating whether they should try to separate the art from the artist or just chuck her stories into the shredder. But it's hard to read her books and believe she had any real confidence as an artist when she was clearly a coward in real life. Those are the top stories. I've got lots more to come, more crime news, some cold case updates. We got to talk about some pop culture, and there's a really cool, weird news story I want to bring to you. So all this and more after the break. I'll be back in 2 and 2.
Please hang up and try again.
And we're back with more True Crime This Week, brought to you by Kodak. You press the button, we do the rest. TMZ reports that Red Hot Chili Peppers guitarist Josh Klinghoffer is being sued for wrongful death after he was caught on camera turning left at an intersection and running into a pedestrian who later died from his injuries. This apparently happened in March in Alhambra. 47-year-old Israel Sanchez was struck by Klinghoffer's vehicle and dragged across the asphalt, sustaining blunt force trauma to his head, Klinghoffer is accused of being distracted behind the wheel. He didn't apply his brakes before hitting the man, but he did pull over immediately and try to offer help. Klinghoffer has played for the Red Hot Chili Peppers since 2009 and became the youngest person to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2012. Police have not yet charged him with any crime, though I imagine that might be coming. His reps told TMZ that it was purely a tragic accident. So last Friday, a guy in a wheelchair was seen dragging a rather large garbage bag out to the street for pickup in the Kips Bay neighborhood of Manhattan. The police got curious and opened the bag, only to discover the body of 31-year-old Yasmin Williams, who'd been shot in the head. It didn't take them long to trace the man in the wheelchair back to 55-year-old Chad Irish, who lived in a nearby apartment complex. Irish has a rather long rap sheet that includes attempted arson for trying to blow up his uncle's home in the Bronx back in 1994, according to the New York Post. When police arrested Irish on Monday, they were nearly overtaken by a mob of citizens trying to enact some street justice, but they were eventually able to bring him to jail. People were screaming, kill him," and at least one bystander tried to punch him in the face. He's since been charged with concealment of a human corpse and is expected to be charged with murder soon enough. One odd little detail appears at the end of this article that's worth mentioning. Chad Irish has a twin brother who also goes by the name Chad Irish. Chad Irish is currently on parole. That other Chad Irish is currently on parole for robbery and assault, which makes this the worst pair of twins since Lindsay Lohan in the Parent Trap reboot. Alec Baldwin was back in court in Santa Fe this week for the manslaughter trial of cinematographer Helena Hutchins, who was shot to death on the set of the movie Rust in 2021 by a gun held by Baldwin, according to CNN. Now, it was a prop gun, but it had been loaded with real ammunition by on-set armorer Hannah Gutierrez Reed, who was found guilty in April and sentenced to 18 months in prison. The prosecution is trying to prove to the jury that Baldwin pulled the trigger, which he denies he did. However, Baldwin's defense attorneys said in their opening remarks that even if he did pull the trigger, he should not be found guilty since it was not his job to load the gun. Having worked on movie sets as a young man back in the day, I agree with this take completely, the take of the defense team, that is. The producers and directors that I've met over the years treat actors like children. It's almost sad, but that's the reputation actors have out in Hollywood. And the whole point of having an armorer on set is to make sure the guns are safe to use at all times. You would never ever expect an actor to do any work outside acting. But of course, politics comes into play in this. He's kind of in a red jurisdiction, and he's very, very liberal, and that has tainted things a little bit. It seems to be a little more politically motivated than motivated by any logic. Can we talk about People Magazine for a second? I want to talk about People Magazine's coverage of Gypsy Rose Blanchard, the young woman who was first a victim of her mother's Munchausen by proxy syndrome before providing her boyfriend with the knife he used to stab her mother to death. It's worth noting, and something that doesn't get mentioned a lot in these articles, is that Gypsy Rose, after the murder, then had sex with her boyfriend in the home and stole $4,400 in cash. She was sentenced to 10 years for her role in the murder before being paroled last December. Now, what I want to talk about are the headlines that are appearing in People Magazine and online at people.com. Here are just a couple that I've seen in the last few days. Gypsy Rose Blanchard is pregnant, expecting first baby with boyfriend Ken Urker. Here's another one. Ken Urker reveals baby shower plans. Gypsy Rose Blanchard isn't rushing into marriage with wonderful boyfriend, quote, "I've got to get divorced first," end quote. Can we please not turn victims and criminals into celebrities like this? Dear people, if you're watching, please go back to digging up dirt on the royal family I enjoy that a lot more, and they kind of deserve it. So thank you very much. That's been my aside for this episode. Let's jump over to weird news, shall we? Are you a fan of Bob's Burgers? You know that Italian restaurant owner, Jimmy Pesto Sr.? Yeah, apparently he's MAGA, or at least the guy who voiced him is. Actor Jay Johnston, who has appeared on Arrested Development and Anchorman, pleaded guilty to a felony this week for his role in the January 6th insurrection in D.C., according to the Associated Press. Video footage showed Johnston pushing against police and helping fellow rioters in a tunnel that led into the Capitol building, at one point holding a stolen police shield over his head and passing it to other people. He faces 5 years in prison at his sentencing on October 7th. Now, he's already been replaced on Bob's Burgers, apparently. Jimmy Pesto will now be voiced by Gypsy Rose Blanchard. Over to pop culture. There's a new 3-part documentary series, true crime docu-series on Hulu that you have to check out. It's really good. It's called Mastermind. Here's the write-up. It's about the first female profiler. A new perspective on the woman whose crime-hunting innovations changed history to stop serial killers. Dr. Ann Burgess must first learn to think like one. Burgess investigates and studies the damaged psyches of victims and their attackers. Basically, you remember that show Mindhunter that Netflix canceled for no reason after 2 seasons? There's Anna Torv's character, the woman in that. She was basically inspired by Dr. Ann Burgess. So this is the woman behind it all. Go watch it, Mastermind on Hulu. Now, the book of the week, the true crime book of the week, is The Incorruptibles by Dan Slater. You're going to want to read this one. It's great. I checked it out. I've got it behind me on the shelf. Here's the write-up. In the early 1900s, prior to World War I, New York City was a vortex of vice and corruption. On the Lower East Side, then the most crowded ghetto on earth, Eastern European Jews formed a dense web of crime syndicates. Gangs of horse poisoners and casino owners, pimps and prostitutes, thieves and thugs, jockeyed for dominance, while their family members and neighbors toiled in the unregulated garment industry. But when the notorious murder of a gambler attracted a global attention, a coterie of affluent German Jewish uptowners decided to take matters into their own hands. Worried about the anti-immigration lobby and the uncertain future of Jewish Americans, the uptowners marshaled a strictly off-the-books vice squad led by an ambitious young reformer. The squad, known as the Incorruptibles, took the fight to the heart of the crime in the city, waging war on the sin they saw as threatening the future of their community. Their efforts, however, led to some unforeseen consequences in the form of a new mobster class who realized in the country's burgeoning reform efforts unprecedented opportunities to amass power. In this mesmerizing and atmospheric account, drawn from never-before-seen sources and peopled with unforgettable characters, Dan Slater tells an epic and often brutal saga of crime and redemption, exhuming a buried history that shaped the modern world. Very cool. True crime history, historic investigation. Check it out, The Incorruptibles. That's the book of the week. And that is the show for the week. I am off to report on a new true crime book. I'm very excited. I'm heading out east this weekend. I'll be back next week, though. Same bat time, same bat channel. And go enjoy the weekend. In the words of the incomparable Murray Saul, the godfather of Cleveland radio, that means we gotta get down, damn it. True Crime This Week is a Fearful Symmetry production. Photo and artwork are licensed through Shutterstock. If you like the cut of my jib, I have another podcast you might enjoy called The Philosophy of Crime, in which I attempt to solve the big questions behind our true crime obsession by looking to philosophy for answers. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next week. Sit, Brownie, sit. Good dog.